going to do a tutorial where we create some Twitter style features inside of a Drupal application. The main features that we're going to create are posts, mentions, likes, and timeline. Now this is a fast-paced tutorial, so I would recommend watching it all the way through, and if you want to try to recreate it yourself, you can go through the written instructions. All the important links are in the description, including the Medium article with all the step-by-step instructions, and all of the code is on GitHub, also linked in the description. Let's get started. Now first, let's get some setup out of the way. I'm going to go through this really quick. We'll use the Drupal recommended composer template to set up our project. We'll use ddev for our local environment. And then we're also going to include Drush with composer. And finally, we'll do a simple site install using the standard profile. So first we need to set up our project, and we're going to do that using the composer Drupal recommended project template. And next we need to set up our local environment, and so we're going to use ddev, which means we'll need to run our ddev config command. Now that ddev is configured, we can run ddev start to spin up our local environment. So now we can use composer to require Drush, and this is going to allow us to run a bunch of commands, including the site install command. And here we're just going to install the standard profile. So now we're running the Drupal standard site install, and then we're going to run a ULI command, drush ULI. And this just generates a kind of like a forget password link. And so we're going to check this out in the browser just to make sure everything looks okay. And of course, everything is looking good. And so we are ready to move on to the next step. For this step, we're going to create and configure the post comment type. So let's head on over to comment types. Now we're going to create a new comment type called posts. We want the target entity type to be user. Now we're going to configure the form display. We want to hide the subject so that only the comment appears. Now we're going to head to account settings because we want to add our post comment field to the user entity. So under add a new field, we're going to select comments. We're going to name it posts. We're going to use the comment type posts. We're going to set preview to disabled and then save the field. To make sure this is working, we're going to hop on over to our profile page. We see that our post comment field is now there. So we'll just add a test comment, save it. And it did look like it saved correctly. The last thing that we're going to do for the post comment type is install the max length module. And so we'll type our composer command, composer require Drupal/max length. Once that is downloaded, we will enable it using Drush. The last thing we need to do is configure max length for the post field, and we'll just set 255 as our length. Now, before we can test this, we actually do need to do one more thing, which is install the CKEditor contrib module. CKEditor 5 is actually not compatible with max length, and so we're just going to use the 4 version. And so here we're going to require the CKEditor module and enable it, and then we have to configure one more thing. All we need to do is edit our basic HTML format and select the CKEditor text editor for that format, save it, and then we'll be able to test. Now let's circle back to our profile page and check that max length is working. It looks like it is, and so we can move on to the next step. Now we're ready to set up the mentions feature, and we're going to use a CKEditor mentions module to do that. So first, let's run our composer command. That's going to download the CKEditor mentions module. We're also going to go ahead and enable the module, but we need to do one more thing before we're ready to use it. This module requires us to add some extra library dependencies, and so we're going to crack open composer.json, and we're going to paste in the repositories from the README of the CKEditor mentions module. We also need to customize our installer paths to make sure CKEditor adds those libraries to the right place. And finally, we're going to copy the composer require command from the README to our console, require it, and that's going to install the dependencies that we need. So now we're ready to enable the mentions filter on our basic HTML format. We're going to go add a permission so that users can see each other's profiles. And so finally, we're able to view a user profile page and then test our mentions functionality. I've already created a test user. You'll need to do the same. And of course, it looks like it's working. The next feature that we're going to tackle is the likes feature. To do that, we're going to leverage the very flexible flag module. And so the first thing that we're going to need to do is, of course, require that using Composer and then enable the module. And so now that we've enabled our flag module, we're ready to create a new flag type. This is going to be our like button. We're going to associate it with the comment entity. We're just going to call it like and unlike. Now we're ready to create a view. We're going to just call this liked post. It's going to be for comment entities of type posts. and we'll create a page display. We're going to adjust the filters, add a flag relationship, create a menu entry, and then now that that's saved, we can go ahead and test our page, and you can see a comment that I liked earlier. And now we're going to move on to setting up our timeline. So the very first thing we need to do is enable the flag follower module. This will create a flag that allows us to follow users. You could do this yourself, but this is just a faster way of setting this up. We need to make sure we add the permissions for authenticated users to be able to flag and unflag other users. Next, we're going to clone our liked post view, and we're going to call it post timeline. We'll remove the page display and we'll add a block display. We need to add an author relationship. Then we add a user ID context filter. We need to allow for multiple values, and then we're going to sort by comment date in descending order. So the plan here is to take this view and plug it into a small custom block plugin, and that is going to essentially be our timeline. So next we're going to create a custom block plugin. We're going to use Drush Generate to help us do that. And so it's going to prompt us for a few things. For the module name, we'll use social. For the block admin label, we'll use timeline. And then everything else can just be the defaults. After that, we're going to create a social.info.yaml because this is a new module that we just added this custom block plugin to. And I pasted in a couple of lines just to make Drupal aware of the module. So this first chunk of code does a couple of things. It looks at the URL parameter to identify the user that we're looking at. And then it tries to find all the users that the current user, so whatever page you're looking at, it's going to find all the users that that user is following. And so what we're trying to do here is build an argument list of author user IDs that we can pass to our view. So this next chunk of code loads our view. We're calling it post timeline, and it takes that list of user IDs and passes them as an argument to our view. And again, so this is going to show all posts by that author. So it's not only the current author, but all the authors that this user follows. Now onto the next chunk of code. This code is going to render the comment form, but it's only going to render it if the user that's looking at this page is the current user. So if you've been on Twitter before, you can post on your own timeline, but you cannot post on other people's timelines. Finally, this last little bit renders the view inside our build array. And for now, we'll just disable caching. And now we can enable our module to make the block plugin available for embedding. And then we'll hop on over to our block layout page to enable our new custom block on the user profile page. And before we do our final test of the user page, we're going to disable the post comment form that was previously on our user page because of course that didn't allow us to see followed user content. So to test, we're going to follow our test user. Then we're going to circle back to our profile page and see that we can now see not only our own content, but also test user content. And that concludes our tutorial. Hope you learned something. Be sure to remember to check out those links in the description. They'll be very helpful for you. I'll see you next time.